The coffee cup tilted. Time seemed to slow as the steaming liquid poured out, splashing onto the lap of the man in the expensive suit. Gasps echoed across the diner. Forks clattered onto plates. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Lisa froze, her heart slamming against her ribs. She had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The man didn't yell. He didn't move. He simply lifted his eyes to hers, a stare so sharp it sent shivers down her spine. Why was everyone suddenly afraid? Who was this man? If you continue the story, let us know. Where are you watching from? Lisa barely had time to breathe. The morning rush had turned the diner into pure chaos. Orders were piling up, customers were impatient, and the sound of sizzling bacon mixed with the non-stop ringing of the kitchen bell. She had been on her feet, running between tables with a forced smile. Tips were low, high, and her paycheck barely covered rent. But choice, she needed this job. Then he walked in. The moment he stepped through the door, the atmosphere shifted. He was different from the usual customers. Too polished, too powerful. His tailored suit, expensive watch, and effortless confidence didn't belong in a place like this. The regulars noticed him immediately. Conversations hushed. A few exchanged nervous glances. Lisa barely had time to register their reactions as she rushed past his table, balancing a tray of drinks. When it happened, her foot caught on the edge of a chair. Her balance wavered, and before she could stop it, the coffee cup tipped, sending a stream of hot liquid straight onto the man's lap. Gasps filled the diner. Lisa's stomach dropped. Her boss's face turned pale. The man slowly stood up, shaking off the coffee, his gaze locking onto Lisa. The diner fell silent. Who was this man? And why did everyone look terrified? Lisa's hands trembled. She held the empty coffee cup. The scalding liquid had already seeped into the man's expensive suit, darkening the fabric. The diner remained eerily silent. Every pair of eyes was on her. Her boss, Mr. Daniels, rushed forward, his face pale. "Oh, my God, sir, Lisa didn't mean to—" held up a hand, cutting him off. The sheer authority in his simple gesture made Lisa's breath hitch. Who was he? Instead of yelling or storming out in anger like most customers would, he dabbed at his suit with a napkin, his movements slow and deliberate. His eyes remained fixed on Lisa, like he was trying to read her. She swallowed hard. Sorry, sir," she stammered, voice barely above a whisper. "It was an accident." His lips twitched into what could have been a smirk, or maybe a frown. It was impossible to tell. "Do you have any idea you just did?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it, something unsettling. Lisa's stomach twisted. I can get you a towel, or dry cleaning. Please, I didn't mean to." A chuckle, not of amusement, of something else. Pay. He finally broke eye contact to glance at Mr. Daniels, who looked like he was on the verge of fainting. "Does she know?" Lisa's brow furrowed. "Know what?" Mr. Daniels visibly gulped. His entire body tensed. "Lisa!" He started, his voice shaky. "This is not just any customer, this is—" Before he could finish, the man interrupted. "Let her figure it out." His voice was calm, a weight that silenced any protests. Lisa's breath quickened. What was happening? The tension and suffocating. People whispered among themselves. And then it clicked. The whispers. The stunned the way even Mr. Daniels looked like he wanted to disappear. His eyes widened as realization crashed down on her. This wasn't just some wealthy businessman. This man owned the entire diner chain. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had just dumped coffee all over him at boss, a billionaire, a man who could have her fired before she could even blink. Her mouth went dry. Oh, God. Mr. Daniels stepped in, laughing nervously. "Sir, please, it was just a small mistake. Lisa is one of our best workers and she—" The man ignored him. He was still watching Lisa. "You're new here?" It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Lisa nodded quickly, feeling dizzy. Yes, sir." "You don't recognize me." She shook her head. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Interesting. Lisa wanted to shrink into the floor. Was he testing her? Was this some kind of cruel game? Her entire body screamed run, but she couldn't move. "Lisa," Mr. Daniels begged, his voice low, "apologize again." She did. Again and again. But the man barely reacted. Instead, he leaned back against the counter, seemingly unbothered by his ruined suit. "You work hard." Lisa blinked. Yes, sir." "You must need the money." She hesitated. Yes, of course." Another pause. Then the question that changed everything. "If you did, would you still work here?" Lisa's breath hitched. What kind of question was that? Her entire body begged her to say yes, to say she loved the job, to say whatever it took to keep him happy. But something in his gaze told her he didn't want a lie. And for the first time since this nightmare started, she didn't look at him as a billionaire or a powerful man who could end her career in an instant. She just answered honestly. "No," she whispered. The air in the diner shifted. A murmur of shock passed through the crowd. Mr. Daniels' face turned completely white. But the man, he smiled. "Good," he said, standing up straight, adjusting his cuffs like nothing had happened. Lisa was too stunned to speak. "You have guts," he said simply. Then, without another word, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, and placed it on the counter. "Come to this address tomorrow," he said. 8 a.m. sharp." Lisa blinked. What?" He turned, already walking toward the exit. Mr. Daniels jumped forward. "Sir, what?" "She'll understand when she gets there," the man said over his shoulder. Lisa picked up the card, her hands trembling. The name on it made her breath catch. It wasn't just any office. It was his personal headquarters. And below his name, 2 words stood out. The moment the door shut behind him, the entire diner erupted into noise. Lisa just stood there, gripping the card, her mind racing. What had just happened? And more importantly, what was waiting for her tomorrow? Lisa thought she had ruined everything. But what if this mistake was actually the beginning of something bigger? Lisa sat on the worn-out couch in her tiny apartment, gripping the business card in her trembling hands. Was this real? She had barely slept, her mind spinning all night. Daniel Grayson, CEO and founder. The man she had dumped coffee on yesterday. The man who could have fired her, humiliated her, or even sued her. But instead, he had given her this. A test, a trick, a chance. She turned the card over again. The address, the time, 8 a.m. It felt unreal. Why would someone like him even remember someone like her? She set her alarm for 6 a.m. Morning came fast. Too fast. Lisa stood outside the massive glass skyscraper, staring up in awe. The building stretched into the clouds, sleek and modern. It was nothing like the world she knew. Her hands clenched into fists. She didn't belong here. "Miss Lisa." She turned. A woman in a sleek black suit stood nearby, holding a tablet. "Mr. Grayson is expecting you." Lisa hesitated, then followed. The lobby was pure luxury. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, people in suits who barely glanced at her. Her worn-out sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. The woman led her to the elevator and pressed the top floor. Lisa swallowed hard. There was no turning back now. When the doors opened, she stepped into a breathtaking office, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the entire city. And there, standing by the window, was Daniel Grayson. He turned, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "You came," he said, his voice calm. Lisa nodded, her throat dry. You told me to. Daniel smirked slightly. And you actually listened. Interesting. Lisa stood frozen, unsure whether to sit or speak. Sit, he finally said. She obeyed, her hands gripping the armrest of the sleek leather chair. Daniel walked to his desk and leaned against it, crossing his arms. Do you know why you're here? Lisa hesitated. Honestly, no. He chuckled. I like that answer. She frowned. Is this about yesterday? Because if it is, I already apologized. It's not about the coffee, Daniel interrupted. His voice was low but firm. It's about you. Lisa blinked. Me? He nodded. I test people, Lisa. Lisa's stomach flipped. Wait, so spilling coffee on you was a test? Daniel smirked. No, that was an accident. But your reaction afterward, that was the real test. Lisa's mind raced. I don't understand. Daniel leaned forward. I watch people. How they react under pressure. How they behave when they think no one important is watching. Lisa's pulse pounded in her ears. You were honest, Daniel continued. You didn't try to flatter me. You didn't grovel. You spoke the truth, even when it could have cost you everything. Lisa swallowed hard. And that matters? His gaze darkened. More than you know. She shifted in her seat. So, what happens now? Daniel studied her for a moment. Then finally he spoke. I'm offering you a choice. Lisa's heart stopped. A choice? You can go back to the diner, he said. Live paycheck to paycheck, stay invisible. Lisa felt her breath catch. That was her life. A cycle of exhaustion, struggle, and just barely getting by. Or, Daniel's voice dropped slightly. You can work for me. Lisa's brain nearly short-circuited. Work for him? Her voice came out shaky. You're offering me a job? Daniel nodded. You have potential. You just don't see it yet. Lisa let out a nervous laugh. I don't even know what you do. Daniel smirked. I own businesses, many businesses, and I need people I can trust. Lisa's stomach twisted. But I have no experience. I'm a waitress. I don't belong here. Daniel's expression didn't change. Neither did I. Once. Lisa's breath caught. What? You think I was born rich? Daniel asked, tilting his head. I grew up with nothing. No connections, no fancy education, just hard work and the ability to recognize opportunities when they came. Lisa swallowed hard. You remind me of myself, he admitted. She blinked. Him, the billionaire. How could someone like him ever compare himself to someone like her? You're at a crossroads, he said. Most people let fear make their decisions for them. But the ones who succeed, they take risks. Lisa's hands trembled. This was insane. What would I even do, she asked. Daniel smiled. You'd start at the bottom, learn everything, earn your way up. No handouts. Lisa exhaled sharply. No handouts. Somehow, that made it easier to believe. If I say yes, she said slowly, what's the catch? Daniel's eyes gleamed. The catch is that you'll have to prove yourself. Every single day. Lisa's stomach twisted. Could she do this? Fear clawed at her chest. The easy answer was no. But something deeper whispered yes. She had spent her whole life just surviving. Maybe it was time to try something more. Lisa met his gaze. Okay. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Okay, what? She took a deep breath. I'll do it. I'll take the job. A slow smile spread across his face. Good choice. Lisa's heart pounded. She had no idea what she had just signed up for. But one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same. Lisa thought her worst mistake had ruined everything. Instead, it just opened the door to a future she never imagined. Lisa sat across from Daniel Grayson, still struggling to process the moment. She had just accepted a job offer from a billionaire. A man who, hours ago, she had unknowingly embarrassed in front of an entire diner. Her hands felt clammy. This couldn't be real. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "You don't believe me, do you?" Lisa let out a nervous laugh. "It's not that. It's just, this doesn't happen to people like me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "People like you?" Lisa hesitated. "People who live paycheck to paycheck. People who serve coffee for a living." Daniel nodded slowly. "That's exactly why I'm offering this to you." Lisa swallowed hard. "But why me? Why not someone with a degree? Someone who actually knows what they're doing?" Daniel smirked. "Because talent isn't always found in fancy offices. Sometimes it's hidden in places no one thinks to look." Lisa's mind raced. This still felt too good to be true. She exhaled sharply. So what exactly would I be doing? Daniel's expression remained unreadable. "You'll start from the ground up. Learn the business. Earn your place. Nothing will be handed to you." Lisa's stomach tightened. She had worked hard her entire life, but never in an environment like this. "What if I fail?" she asked, her voice small. Daniel shrugged. "Then you fail. But something tells me you won't." A long silence settled between them. Lisa felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had two options: walk away and go back to her normal life, or take a risk and step into the unknown. Lisa's pulse pounded. She already knew her answer. She straightened her back and met his gaze. "When do I start?" Daniel's lips curved into a small smile. "Tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp." Her heart slammed against her chest. This was real. Lisa took a deep breath. "Okay." Daniel pushed a folder across the desk. "Here's everything you need to know. Read it. Understand it. This won't be easy." Lisa picked it up, her fingers shaking slightly. "I don't expect it to be." Daniel studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. See you tomorrow." Lisa stood, gripping the folder tightly. Her entire life had just changed in an instant. As she walked out of the office, her mind swirled with a million thoughts. Was she really ready for this? Or had she just made the biggest mistake of her life? Lisa thought she had ruined her future. Instead, she had just stepped into something far bigger than she could have imagined. Lisa lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling of her tiny apartment. The folder Daniel Grayson had given her sat unopened on the nightstand. Her mind kept replaying everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. She had walked into work expecting another exhausting shift. She had walked out with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But now, fear was creeping in. Was she really ready for this? She had spent her whole life just getting by. She knew how to handle rude customers, low wages, and long hours. But stepping into Daniel Grayson's world, that was completely different. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she embarrassed herself? She rolled onto her side, gripping the blanket. But what if she was? The thought sent a rush of adrenaline through her. Lisa had spent years believing she wasn't capable of more. No college degree, no fancy background, just hard work and survival. But Daniel saw something in her, and for the first time, she wanted to see it too. With a deep breath, she sat up and opened the folder. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back. She wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. The next morning, Lisa arrived at the skyscraper 10 minutes early. She still felt out of place as she walked through the glass doors, but this time, she didn't let it stop her. A receptionist led her to a conference room where Daniel was already waiting. He glanced at his watch as she entered. "You're early," Lisa nodded. "I figured being late wouldn't be a great start." He smirked. "Good instinct." Lisa sat, setting the folder down. "I read everything." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And?" Lisa exhaled. "It's a lot?" Daniel nodded. It will be, but the real test starts now. Lisa's stomach twisted. What's the test? She asked. Daniel leaned forward. How fast you learn, how well you adapt, and whether or not you actually want this. Lisa swallowed hard. She could walk away now, go back to the diner, go back to the life she knew. Or she could stay and prove to herself that she was more than just a waitress. She sat up straighter. I want this, she said firmly. Daniel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Lisa knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was moving forward, and she wasn't looking back. Sometimes, the worst mistakes lead to the best opportunities. The question is, are you brave enough to take them? Lisa stood in the elevator, watching the numbers tick down. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had done it. She had walked into this towering skyscraper, faced one of the most powerful men in the city, and refused to let fear win. As the doors slid open, she stepped onto the busy street. The city felt different now, bigger, full of possibilities. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just a waitress struggling to get by. She was someone with potential. She had been given a chance, but it was up to her to make the most of it. Her past didn't define her. Her mistakes didn't define her. What mattered was what she did next. As she walked toward the diner, she glanced at her reflection in a store window. She barely recognized the woman staring back. She wasn't the same person who had spilled coffee yesterday, and she never would be again. Have you ever had a moment where a mistake turned into an opportunity? What did you do with it? Share your story in the comments. And remember, sometimes the moment that feels like the biggest failure is actually the start of something life-changing.